Like that, those teams were good, and those teams, the Celtics, even without one of the Jays, were still better than like 70% of the East Coast. So I feel like just saying 36-6 over the past 3 seasons, I need more context here, and just being like, instead of me being like, that's not gonna wow me, being like, oh wow, I'm like, that's been a good team for years. It's the most basic of stats among a swath of more advanced ones that support the Celtics' decision to move on from Brown. Not because Brown isn't a good player, but because he isn't valuable at his $57 million salary. Now this, so see, I'm fine with this, okay? I personally, when the Pistons, they were rumored to be like, Pistons fans were talking about Jaylen Brown, and they were like, oh, we should trade for Jaylen Brown. This is where I'm like, okay, at this contract at $57 million, I do not want to trade for Jaylen Brown. This is where I can do the value part, right? Especially when Peyton Pritchard makes $7 million. I get that. I understand that. I didn't want Jaylen Brown on my team because I didn't want Jaylen Brown opposite Cade Cunningham. Because in all facets, and I might be biased because I'm a Detroit fan, but in all facets, Cade Cunningham is a better playmaker, has a better assist to turnover ratio. Like Jaylen Brown had like 5 assists to like 3.6 turnovers this year, man. He had like Jaylen Brown has his weaknesses, right? He's still a great player, but he has the glaring weaknesses where I'm like, I don't want to watch that for 82 games personally when I have Cade Cunningham on the floor. Now the thing is with this is that he isn't valuable at his $57 million salary. What's funny is that you traded for Paul George. That's what's funny to me. Yeah, Paul George is owed $57 million this year, and he's owed $56 million the next year. And a lot of people are being like, well, they get out of the contract earlier because Jaylen Brown was locked in for longer. This still is 2 years of Paul George basketball during Jason Tatum's prime. And yes, you get draft picks, but that's in like the long future. So the Celtics right now are basically hoping that Peyton Pritchard makes the leap and then Paul George is there. I think the Celtics are basically just betting on Peyton Pritchard and being like, oh, you're the cheaper contract. So basically when we're off the Paul George contract, you'll be a better value than Jaylen Brown. I think that's the hope, which I can understand, but damn, that's a big risk. The league is overrun with strategy, an Eastern Conference scout said. Honestly, I'm not sure how people who work in the league are actually watching games.
They're not.
An Eastern Conference scout is like, bro, y'all are tripping. What are y'all doing here? The apron forces you to analyze all of your spending more and put more attention on detail on getting the most out of each salary slot. I buy this. I think that now we're in the period where teams are getting more and more adjusted to the value of each contract. And a lot of contracts that sounded good like 3 years ago, I think a lot of teams are like, oh shit. Oh no, we're locking in this guy for how long? I feel like it's this now. But this feels kind of like an overcorrect. I feel like we've seen a lot of trades this offseason alone, and we've often been like, dude, the return for that is low, isn't it? The return for that is low. That's it. You know, like that's it for Giannis. Like that's it for Kawhi. Like that's it for.
When I seen that Giannis trade, I was like, bro, that's all they're getting. That's it.
Like there's so many like deals that we've seen where we're like, oh, I thought we'd see more of this stuff, or but I feel like the price overall for a lot of players is just lower. As with any trend, there's often a first mover advantage. The Celtics use math to win the 2024 NBA title and 3-point shooting their way to all sorts of records. Yes. Yeah, that's why the analytics comment's kind of funny, where it's like the Celtics kind of did calculator ball for a couple of seasons. And it's not the same as when they won the championship. They have different personnel now. But whenever I do watch the Celtics, I feel like they do turn to calculator ball. Whenever we get a Derek White shot before like 18 seconds in the shot clock, I'm like, dude, that's a straight up calculator decision in my mind. I don't think I'm correct, but that's what it feels like. We're going to turn into baseball if we're not careful, a Western Conference executive said, where you have every defender between second base and right field and no one can get a hit and it becomes boring. I don't think every basketball team can afford to do the advanced metric stuff and succeed. Like, you're going to still have advanced metrics teams be bad. You can still have that, right? A lot
Mm-hmm.
of people have tried to copy the Celtics in the last couple of years, and they can't because there's not enough players in the league that are able to do what the 24 Celtics did at an elite level. So I don't think it's going to turn into baseball. I just don't think that's possible. So we're looking here at the blueprint of the 2024 Boston Celtics that won the championship. And notice how hard it is to have these kind of players all on the same roster at the same time. First of all, you need two stretch bigs that can also defend. The Celtics have two of those, right? Not many other playoff teams even have one, right? A stretch big that can defend. Like, the Celtics had two of those, right? Then on top of that, they had two lockdown guards that could also shoot threes. They both shot 40% from three that tournament. Not the tournament, the playoff series, right?
Mm.
Then on top of that, you had two wings that could dribble, create their own shot, and also be really good at defense. Like, this team was top 5 in offense and defense. This is one of the best teams of all time, right? First in offensive rating and third in defensive rating, okay? The next year, all right, they lose to New York, right? Jason Tatum gets hurt, but they would have lost that series anyway. Like, it's so hard to even whiff this calculated basketball, what they did. Shots didn't fall. All right, this season, right? Alf Horford and Kristaps Porzingis are gone. They tried to substitute that with Vucevic and Kata, right? Now, the thing about Kata is that he's not a stretch big. And the thing about Vucevic is that he can't defend. So now you have two centers that only do one of each. And Vucevic, it got to a point where he was getting like not playing that much after a while. So I feel like this whole calculator basketball thing is just so tough to replicate that you really had to strike lightning. And even then, it's like, just like lightning, it's gone. So I don't think we're going to get calculator basketball on this scale, okay? I just don't think that there are enough players in the NBA that can optimally play that way. After winning the title, so
It's funny you say that because I remember watching the finals and I'm just watching them fucking study shoot threes. I'm just like, what the fuck am I watching?
Celtics are bought by Bill Chisholm, who went to Dartmouth, and Warden funded the deal. Complex layer of private equity firms.
Old Spice gentlemen.
Private equity firms.
Guess I've always been a gentleman.
After winning the title, Celtics are bought by Bill Chisholm, who went to Dartmouth, and Warden funded the deal. Complex layer of private equity firms. Yeah, I feel like there's a private equity thing as well. June Lee, I think, made a video. June Lee made a video, and then he collaborated with Frank Michael Smith about how private equity like affects some of these basketball teams as well. And they want answers to the tests. But again, you can get too analytical, I think. And that's kind of like wild. Because I don't think that here's my thing. I don't think that Brad Stevens wanted to do this deal. I feel like there's a part of me that feels like Brad Stevens was heavily pressured or influenced or pushed by ownership over this. Because I feel like Brad Stevens, it's either that or Brad Stevens just instantly lost the fastball somehow. And I feel like that's just less believable. Because I feel like prime Brad Stevens would not trade for a 37-year-old Paul George. He wouldn't do that. I don't believe that. It's hard. Another interesting aspect of the trade that the 76ers recently fired Daryl Morey. Yes. Okay. This trade has enormous potential value for the 76ers as they shed George's contract. Terrible contract. I cannot believe that the Clippers got the Paul George contract, and I can't believe that two teams were able to get off of Paul George's contract. I can't believe that happened, right? When Paul George got traded to the Sixers, people were like, oh, that contract? He's about to be 36, making that much money. Didn't you guys learn from the Tobias Harris deal? Then somehow they got off the contract. And I don't think those picks are going to be like that good, but whatever. As some league sources suggested, you could make it a case that the Sixers are getting Brown for free. Dude, I am so surprised that the Sixers made this deal and were able to make this deal without shipping VJ Edgecombe.
Yeah,
or
they didn't ship
any
up
other
nobody.
young
Like,
Sixers
bro, they
player.
kept their whole team.
Even Phylon that they just got. I thought that he would be up for grabs as well. But that's because we're thinking in the older mindset of being like, hey, for a player this big, you should actually have a bigger trade package for this. That's what I'm thinking. All right, so the next article comes from The Athletic, and it says, Inside Celtics Jaylen Brown trade, how differences in perspective drove stunning deal. Jay King and Sam Amick. And before I read through this, I always want to say, support local journalism, support national journalism. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to get the inside scoop on stuff like this. We would just have
That's facts, though.
insiders.
That's facts, though. You ain't lying. Show love.
tweeting out PR pieces on Twitter and not really knowing what's going on. So do that. Now, an important thing here to note is that I think Shams did a TV hit, and he said that Jaylen Brown himself didn't ask for a trade. And I think that's an important part as well, is that Jaylen Brown didn't want to leave Boston, but Boston was shipping him. Now, what I saw from a lot of people were like, oh, Jaylen Brown's not going to like this. I mean, there are some players that have been in trade talks for seasons at a time, and it's just gone on, right? A popular first team all trade talks was Miles Turner and Tyler Hero, right? I think the main difference between Jaylen Brown, Tyler Hero, and Miles Turner is that Jaylen Brown was a really big part of the Celtics championship run. He even won Finals MVP. So I feel like a lot of people are like, you're gonna trade a person that was a Finals MVP 2 years ago and try to like ship him out. After the Giannis trade package that got reported and whatnot, a lot of people were like, oh man, Jaylen Brown, he's not gonna like it. I mean, of course he's not gonna like it, but if you do have a chance to get a player like Giannis, these kind of trade proposals are part of the business, right? I didn't see anything that was like super different than like the Miles Turner trade talks and the Tyler Hero trade talks, but I do understand that Jaylen Brown has every right to feel a type of way because unlike those two players, he has competed and won Finals MVP and helped win them a championship and 2 Finals appearances. Like, this is a way more successful player that's getting put in trade talks. I get it. So how did Brown's time with the Celtics come to such an abrupt end? How did they become so open to trading him? Even after pursuit of Giannis fell short. Got it. Yes. Brown and McGrady have had a close friendship for years, dating back to at least 2018 when they worked out together at Tracy McGrady's gym. Years later, they would reveal on a podcast that McGrady helped convince Brown not to request a trade from the Celtics early in his career. When exactly was that podcast, though? Is that recent? All right, so it says that Tracy McGrady convinced him not to ask for a trade after the Celtics lost to the Bucks in the second round of the playoffs in 2019. Okay, 2019, that was like 3 years ago. No, that's not it. 2019 was like 3 years into his career, right? 2019 was Jaylen Brown's 3rd year in the league, lost to the Bucks in 5. There was a lot going on here. Dude, this was the Jason Tatum, Kyrie Irving saga. I totally understand. They had Gordon Hayward, Kyrie Irving. This makes way more sense knowing their roster. Yeah, this makes sense. That totally tracks. There's no way. And the next year, Brad Stevens was the coach. They got Kemba Walker. Yeah, that makes sense. This totally tracks. It felt like the Celtics at that time, like nothing was really like they were making like moves and making like splashes, but they weren't really like getting over the hump, I guess. Fair. I get that. But he would stay in Boston for the next decade if it worked to him. The quality of the package the Celtics received and the timing of the deal with 3 seasons left on the Brown contract left some around the league wondering why the team seemed to feel so much urgency to move Brown now.
Yeah, like,
that's what I'm thinking here, because when you read the initial Brown-George deal, you're like, this feels like not a panic move, but it feels like one of those deals where the star is running out of their contract, like it's their last year of their contract, you need to get something for him. That's what this deal like kind of looked like. It was like, oh, Jaylen Brown's leaving, we gotta, but yeah, this feels like a panic move, honestly. It feels like a panic move just because of how underwhelming the deal is. Over recent weeks, the Celtics began to give other teams the impression that they were seriously weighing the possibility of a future without Brown, even after the Giannis trade fizzled. Though team sources said they kept Brown in the loop throughout the whole process of trade negotiations and that he wasn't surprised by any of the news that became public, he took offense to the way they approached the situation. Fair. That's totally fair. This is a guy that wanted to probably retire a Celtic. You know, even though he asked for a trade in 2019, there was some frustration going on, but I think after that, he really seemed dedicated in staying in Boston, did not ask for a trade, right? So yeah, I'd be upset too, because in Jaylen Brown's mind, he's given so much to this organization, and it feels like they discarded him after just like a really minor failure. Like, yeah, you blew a 3-1 lead to the Sixers, but that would make me throw away the Brown and Tatum thing, right? I definitely think there's more to it, knowing that Stevens is probably getting criticized. I feel like this is the private equity ownership that has their like hands on, they have more of their hands on what they want the Celtics to look like in the future, and Brad Stevens is probably just like, oh, you want me to get rid of this Jaylen Brown contract? You know, but hey. And again, these picks, this is like 2020 2028, 2031. So who's to say? But at the time right now, it doesn't sound like a good contract. It doesn't sound like a good trade, no matter what. Because of the Paul George, man. He played half a season last year.
That's what I'm
And he played half
saying.
a season the year before that. You traded for a guy that we might not even know if he's going to be on the court for that long.
Literally.
George had 2 more years left in his contract, but a league source also said this trade was not driven by finances. Interesting. The Celtics' actions suggested that they valued Brown differently than how he valued himself.
So what the fuck was
there
they
were
driven
even
by?
signs back in February that they were considering a major move involving Brown, as league sources say that they made a late push for
It sound like they ain't like that nigga. That what it sound like to me.
Giannis before the trade deadline. Okay. The Heat won those sweepstakes. The Heat always had the better trade package. The Heat always had the better trade package, and the Celtics just had to come to terms with that. All right. In the days leading up to this week's deal with the Sixers, it's quite telling that 2 of the reported suitors, Denver and Portland, had shown no interest in meeting the exorbitant asking price that Boston had previously put forth. All right. So Denver and Portland, right? Denver and Portland. Who would that be? Would it be Jokic and Murray? Because that's the thing that makes Jaylen Brown's contract hard to trade, because he makes $57 million a year. This is a playoff team. They're not trying to get worse at basketball. They have Jokic's prime to contend with, right? Portland, on the other hand, has like hella guards, right? Now, what is interesting about this is that Portland was not interested in this and traded for Ja Morant. And the Ja Morant deal was like one where we were like, oh, that's it for Ja Morant. I feel like this is just a new normal that the NBA is in, right? Where it's like, hey, your players aren't as valuable as you think they are now, because with this player, it's going to be harder for us to be able to stay under the apron, right? Is your player good enough for us to deal with the financial ramifications of trading for him? And I feel like a lot of people are just like, no. How the Celtics front office executives all around the NBA have been talking about the unreasonably high bar they'd set, how the Celtics expressed a strong desire to land as many as 4 first-round picks. How many teams even have 4 first-round picks? That's the question, right? That's a high price, and I feel like not many people have that anymore. Well, I'm not saying that not many people have that anymore, but I feel like not many teams want to get rid of 4 first-round picks anyway, right? All right, so 4 first-round picks, the maximum tradable future first-round picks. This is from Bobby Marks in May. I don't know if this is updated yet, but we're going to go. So Brooklyn Nets have 9. Charlotte has 7. Memphis has 7. Thunder have 7. Spurs have 4. All right. Jazz have 5. Wizards have 5. Rockets 6. Blazers 5. Atlanta Hawks 4. Bulls 4. Pistons 4. Warriors 3. Pelicans 4. Sixers 4. Kings 4. Raptors 4. Mavericks 4. Clippers 3. Heat 2. Bucks 2. Celtics 3. Pacers 3. Cavs 1. Oh, good God.
Damn.
Timberwolves 1. Lakers 2. Knicks 1. Magic 1. Suns 2. Denver none. All right. Yeah. So I feel like of the teams we all read, 4 first-round picks is just a steep price now. And I feel like this is an example of teams and franchises not getting accustomed to what that means anymore. People assume the Houston Rockets were going to get involved, and the Houston Rockets were like, no. The Houston Rockets already made their Kevin Durant move. To make a Kevin Durant and Jaylen Brown move, I feel like it'd be like, you know, a Blazers team source said the Blazers were never enamored with Brown, even before Boston made it known he was available. 2 factors went into the Blazers' disinterest. Their analytics viewed him as a negative player, and the Celtics' asking price was too high. Now, here's what it is. Here's what this comes from, is that the verbiage is interesting. A negative player is crazy, right?
That's what
I
I'm
get
saying,
that.
like,
the
what?
wording just makes it sound worse, right? I get that. I get that you can have analytics be like, hey, the Celtics were better when Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown were on the court than when just Jaylen Brown was on the court, right? A negative player is interesting, but I feel like we have, I feel like there's another word for this. I feel like there has to be another word that makes it seem like a less negative connotation. That's what I'm trying to say here. The Cool Market suggested the existence of a significant gap between the general perception of Brown, who finished 6th in MVP voting. To be fair, the MVP voters are not analytics people. They are like journalists and national TV pundits, and so not all of them are analytics people. So I totally get that. But then, like, I guess people like in NBA circles or like in front offices are just like, no, I'm good. Though the idea of him being viewed as the seventh best player in a given team was widely mocked, a recent report that one front office member saw Brown in that way, which is crazy. Like that, this was crazy. Someone called him the seventh best player on a team and wasn't a starting caliber. It's wild that someone said that he wasn't a starting caliber player and was the seventh best player on the team. Like that, I think is a step too far, right? Negative player, the wording, it's like, but that's the thing is like a player can have analytical weaknesses, but the verbiage is just brutal. Just brutal, man. Even more pointedly, a current general manager, speaking anonymously, told The Athletic that he doesn't view Brown as a top 50 player in the NBA. Now, I'm not a Jaylen Brown fan, all right? I'm not a Jaylen Brown fan. Like, I'm not really cheering for anyone that's played for the Celtics before like that. I'm not a Jaylen Brown fan, but I feel like that's crazy. It's hard for me to believe that with the opportunity and the skill set that Jaylen Brown is just not a top 50 player in the NBA. That's the thing where it's like, I can give you 20, I can give you 25. If you don't think he's a top 20 player in the NBA, fine. If you don't think he's a top 25 player in the NBA, I'll hear you out. Like 50, I think it's where it gets crazy. I feel like it's not disrespectful. I just feel like y'all are wilding, you know? Because I want to see that list. And I'm not even in the business of comparing players like that, but I want to see the list. For all of Brown's individual accolades, the Celtics over the years consistently saw no drop off when he left the court. I think that's just an indication of how complete those Boston Celtics teams were, bro. That Celtics team was missing Porzingis for like half the playoffs, and they still were trucking. I think that they just made a well-oiled machine, okay? That's what I feel like, man. And I understand, like, it's kind of wild, man. Stevens always seemed to place a high value on Brown, making him the highest paid player in the NBA in 2023. That's the thing. I don't think that this is Brad Stevens regretting his contract decision, but I don't think that Stevens just soured on this contract all on his own. I feel like there definitely probably was some, like, not ownership meddling, but like probably some ownership.
Man, ownership made his ass get rid of him, man. He up in that motherfucker talk about Black Wall Street. That nigga talking about too much black positivity. They had to get his ass smooth on me. They had to get his ass smooth on, man.
Pushing, being like, hey, we should probably trade him. I just feel like Brad Stevens, because Brad Stevens didn't have to do this. He didn't have to make him the highest paid player in the NBA, you know? Now, here's what's interesting. He is slated to be the seventh highest paid player in the NBA next season, behind Tatum. So I totally understand that the Celtics are like, hey, we would have the number 3 highest paid player in the league and the number 7 highest paid player in the league. I can see them being like, this is gonna fuck us over for years to come, right? I can definitely see that. And if they were like, oh, hey, one less year of the Jaylen Brown contract, way worth it. If they saw that was worth it, fine. Like it's still, I'm like, okay, well, I totally understand parts of it, like all these parts, but when they add up to like a whole, I'm just like, damn, you know, it's just like, oh, we're trying to spend less money. Cool. And then I'm like, okay. And then they go, oh, Jaylen Brown's a negative player. I'm like, damn, you know? So when it comes to Brown's market, it's clear rival executives didn't believe he was valuable enough to justify the contract. Fair. I get it. It's the whole analytical negative thing where I'm just like, you know, what's more, some rival executives say they believe Stevens was at a negotiating disadvantage because he never truly shopped Brown to the entire league in the past. Yeah, I get that. As for the notion that Brown should have waited, the possibility of the star making a formal trade request was seen by rival executives as the sort of thing that would put even more duress on the Celtics. So if Brown started asking for a trade, that would have potentially tanked his value even more than what they got for him. What does that even mean? Would that have just been Paul George straight up? Like, what?
I don't know. Something seemed fishy about this shit. This shit seemed a little racial to me.
Like, what's even more than that? Like, less picks? Ah, man. Damn. So this is just a very interesting thing where it's like Brad Stevens and the Celtics valued Jaylen Brown way more than the entire league. Because, again, yeah, the team had an opportunity to trade for Kevin Durant, and they did say no. So something shifted when he took the reins. This has been my favorite season so far, being able to get an opportunity to lead a group. Oh, yeah. He also never really been the true number 1 option, so I get that. He had fun doing that. So he had fun being the number 1 option, it seems, but he's getting traded to a place where he's definitely not that. He might not even be the number 2 option if I'm keeping it in the stack row. You know, like, you got Embiid, Maxey, then Brown, right? Also, I feel like Jaylen
This nigga talking bullshit.
Brown has every right to be upset because, him being an analytical
Whatever you say,
negative,
bro.
that when you hear that kind of talk and conversation and be like,
Cause he
I'd be
really
the
believe this
seventh
shit
best
he talking
player on
about.
a team. If I had just taken a Jason Tatumless Celtics team to second place in the Eastern Conference, again, right? When Jason Tatum went down and he was going to be out for the year, no one expected the Boston Celtics to be that good. They expected them to fight for a play-in spot. Like, that was the big consensus for a lot of people, being like, the Celtics are just not going to be good. This could be a good gap year for the Celtics. But then Jaylen Brown took them to the second seed. So yeah, I totally understand why Jaylen Brown feels disrespected by that analytics comment.
Wait, if you were locked up at any Illinois
Shit, I
juvenile
feel
detention
disrespected.
center, such as Cook County, the Audie Home, or anywhere else in the system, a global settlement may be coming in 2026.
Illinois.
So yeah,
take
I
y'all
totally
fuck niggas to
understand
the
why
second
Jaylen Brown
seed.
feels disrespected by that
And you niggas
analytics
trade
comment,
me?
And
Oh,
Jaylen Brown
man.
was playing so great that I had Joe
Oh,
Mazzulla as like a
brother.
coach of the year candidate, bro. I was like, yeah, the fact
Nigga
that Joe
didn't average
Mazzulla and the
30.
Celtics could be this good, I was like, this is an amazing coaching job. And I wasn't thinking at any time in the season that Jaylen Brown's a negative player at this point in the junction. I thought that Jaylen Brown was just doing what he needed to do. All right, so the good thing was that the Celtics were the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference, but it felt like, again, people were questioning, because Jason Tatum, I thought, was expected to miss the entire season, but he came back early. And people were like, oh, what would Jaylen Brown think? But I feel like Jaylen Brown was like thinking of the big picture, and that's fine. I don't think he said anything wild here. Not helping the external perception of the situation, Tatum's trainer, Drew Hanlon, posted several times on social media about how well the Celtics played when the ball is in his client's hands. Yeah, dude. And Drew Hanlon, this is not the first time he's done this. For example, guys, Drew Hanlon's a popular NBA trainer. I think he's also Joel Embiid's trainer. And so when the Joel Embiid versus Nikola Jokic, that whole thing where Embiid won an MVP that I don't think he should have won. We had people like Drew Hanlon, like, of course, it's one thing to advocate. It's one thing to advocate for your guys. I get it. But when you try to pretend that you're a neutral party on social media and everyone's like, no, cut it out, bro. Cut it out. Last night, Tatum had a usage rate of 39.4. Celtics are really tough to beat when Tatum's usage is over 33. Like, that right there can be interpreted as something like a backhanded comment. That's what it is. And of course, Tatum having a usage rate of 29%, of course, he just got back from an Achilles injury, With Tatum healthy again, it would have been understandable if the Celtics wanted to flip their hierarchy back to the old normal. I just don't feel like... I feel like with these two, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, it never really felt... I never personally felt like the gap between the number 1 and number 2 option with these two was that far apart for it to matter, right? If you look at some other teams in the league where you have like Cade Cunningham, the gap between Cade Cunningham and the number 2 option on Detroit is like miles apart, right? Same thing with not really. Like Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, there's a gap there, obviously. That's like a smaller gap for sure. I'm trying to think of another close gap between the number 1 and number 2 options than like these two. I feel like the gap between these two in terms of like how they played, it didn't feel like it never really felt like Batman and Robin here. It often felt like Batman and Nightwing, right? I think that's the clear thing. Where it always...
That's like the best. That's the best description I done heard somebody give. That's true. That's actually true.
Felt like Batman and Nightwing to me, where it was like these two are so seamless in their priorities and options to where it often felt like either of them could take over at any time, right? It reminds me, this is not the best. This is not the best comparison, but we still have arguments about Kevin Durant and Steph Curry and who's the number 1 option for those Warriors teams. Because yes, Steph Curry was the more decorated player on those Warriors teams, but Kevin Durant won the Finals MVPs. They were so seamless that it didn't really feel like a number 1 option. It felt like you had 2 number 1 options. And I never really felt that between these two, the hierarchy was that far apart. It often felt like they were at the same table always. It never really felt like, Contributing to concerns about the situation, the Celtics believe that Brown went off script too often during playoff games as Boston blew a 3-1 first-round lead to Philadelphia. Okay, this is interesting. I like this as a reasoning. That's fine. Over the final 3 games of the series, the Celtics were outscored by 57 points with Brown on the court. Here's the thing again with these things is that sometimes this stuff is out of your control, right? I don't think you can't, again, I feel like we deal with absolutes and analytics. You can't say that all 57 points happened, but like it's Brown's fault, right? Because again, the Celtics did not have an answer for Embiid. That's not on Jaylen Brown. The Celtics were like guessing on how to guard Embiid by the end of the series. Like Vucevic got a DNP in game 7, I think, right? He shot 12 of 27 from the field. Okay, finishing the series with more turnovers than assists. That's pretty bad. That's why I didn't want him in Detroit. That's a real reason. I get that. But the whole, like, when you go, the Celtics were outscored by 57 points with Brown on the court. I'm like,
He
that's
can't
not
do nothing about
all.
that.
There's more to the story here. Lead off with this part. All right. The thing with Jaylen Brown for me is that there are clear weaknesses to his game. Lead off with those. Lead off with those first.
Nigga,
And I'm
left
way more on
hand,
board. Tonight, I wish we
assists,
played that style and trusted the
decision
style
making,
more,
like,
even throughout the playoffs and even through wins and losses. Obviously, it's not always the easiest decision, but I wish that style for our team was how we empowered the rest of the group. You saw tonight how everyone came out and they played their tail off. I wish we trusted that more. Now, this is an interesting quote because I feel like, again, the Celtics, had to integrate Jason Tatum back into the swing of things, but also at the same time, that that's not 100% Jason Tatum out there. I don't think it's a criticism of head coach Joe Mazzulla. I think it's more like just a thing where it's like, hey, you didn't have to give the keys back to Tatum, right? But you still had to make sure that his seatbelt was on. You had to make sure he was going to be able to stay along for the ride, right? It is what it is. In the end, the clash in identities seem to not necessarily be between a player and a coach, but possibly between an organization and a player. I think that sums it up really perfectly here.
That's a
I don't
great
think
summary.
I feel like Joe Mazzulla, if we would have heard more from Joe Mazzulla, I feel like if Joe Mazzulla was annoyed with having Brown as a player. But I think that this is due to circumstances beyond Brad Stevens. And Brad Stevens now has a press conference, so we can listen to that. All right, so here's Brad Stevens after he's been asked that he has 70% of his cap tied up in 2 players, still with the Paul George thing.
I know there's a salary rule talking about how you can't have 70% of the salary cap tied up in players.
Still do.
You still do.
That's right.
So
good follow-up.
What?
Yeah, you could tell like he didn't want to trade him. Like I've been around white people enough to know that look on his face is like, what the fuck is y'all doing? Like that is like the professional trying to keep it together, but like deep down, like what the fuck is these people doing?
Next.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that it's
that the Jaylen Brown contract was.
So y'all traded him to still be in the same position?
It's going to be hard to trade out. It was going to be hard to find a team, except a team that could afford that without like splitting it up into
not
like
2 years.
younger players or whatnot. And luckily for them, Philadelphia had a bad enough contract to be able to make it work, and they were able to get picks out of it. So like I get it, but at the same time, it's the principle of what Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have been able to do together and been able to achieve together. If this Celtics team was
better be
like
good.
underachieving for the last 7 years or last even
better
4
do
years,
better.
I'd be like, oh, dang. But like they just won a championship 2 years
That's
ago.
what I'm saying.
I can't believe that timelines in the league have become accelerated like this.
I've lost sleep over the fan part of it. I get it. Like there's a bunch of 7 jerseys around. I'm pretty sure I bought it. So I get it.
This just doesn't give off the vibe of a GM that really wanted to do this deal 100%. And keep in mind, like Brad Stevens used to coach Jaylen Brown. I'm sure that there's a deeper personal relationship here. And I feel like maybe the Celtics got that new ownership with the private equity influence, and they don't really understand the emotional gravity of a deal like this and how.
How about this? They don't care. But they don't give no fuck. They just gonna cut that check and say, nigga, you better do what we telling you.
If this backfires,
And he best to do it, they telling him.
backfires, I think this is the first major move for the new ownership.
It might be them Saudi niggas. Everything them Saudi niggas touch, they fuck up.
Group influence. If this backfires, then you've lost a lot of goodwill with that fan base in a short amount of time. Like this could be potentially huge. And last but not least, Brad Stevens says that Jason Tatum didn't have anything to do with the Jaylen Brown trade. I totally believe that. That would be so wild if Jason Tatum did. I don't think there's any point where Jason Tatum would be like, I want Paul George. That doesn't make sense. That wouldn't make sense to me.
Nigga, I look him up and down like, nigga, is you okay?
in the grand scheme of things. I don't think Jason Tatum gives a shit about 2031 draft picks. But this just an overall interesting, wild move here over time. And I'm glad that I'm able to read about this stuff because it really is interesting. Like, it's an interesting situation. As a longtime content creator, I consider myself a student of the game. I love nerding out and being constantly entertained and inspired by some of the best creators and projects in the space. It doesn't matter the genre. For example, one of my favorite sports creators, Mapify, has a series called Beyond the Bleachers. They break down the correlation between the geography and impact of stadium locations all around the world. Episode 1 compares European football stadiums to American football stadiums. Episode 2 examines the size and age of stadiums between Europe and North America, while Episode 3 explores the diverse cultures that stadiums foster.
That shit sound decent. I'm gonna have to check that out.
It's a riveting commentary that answers a lot of questions I had about stadium location choices and how it subliminally affects us as fans. Beyond the Bleachers is a show original to Nebula, the creator-owned streaming service that I am very proud to be a part of.
Oh shit.
It is the home of incredible content from some of the best creators in the world and is the sponsor of this video. The best way to support me is by signing up for Nebula with my link. There are multiple plans that you can do to help support me. There's the one-time lifetime payment of $300.
Oh wait, okay, that is my cue to get the fuck on. This nigga's trying to charge 300 for some lifetime shit just for content. We're not doing that. Shout out Kofi. Y'all have a good day. Have a blessed day. Have all that day. I'll be back in a couple seconds, not a couple minutes. See y'all soon. To be positive. Love y'all, man.